Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Kilmeade, and welcome to Fox News Tonight. We've got a big show for you this evening. We've been lining it up all day, including new developments in the NFL. The national anthem controversy is raging right now. Plus, today is Columbus Day, but some folks don't want to let you celebrate that anymore. For example,
Christopher Columbus represents genocide. Christopher Columbus represents genocide.
It's hard to get in the parade mood with that guy yelling out like that and not wearing a shirt. It was muggy, though. We'll have the latest on the ferocious wildfires sweeping across the Northern California region. We're getting word now, sadly, a number of people have died due to the fires. We're trying to get updates on that, and we'll update you throughout this hour. But first, to our top story. The Trump administration releasing a brand new immigration plan to fulfill key campaign promises on securing the border and cracking down on illegal immigration, while also trying to solve the DACA problem, which so many people have been focusing on. But is that indeed a distraction? Joining us right now from Washington is Sarah Flores, the Director of Public Affairs for the Justice Department. Welcome, Sarah. Thanks for staying up late with us.
Great to be here.
I know the administration was focused on tax reform, and we thought after health care it was going to be one at a time. Why was it important to release an immigration plan as well?
Well, when the Attorney General found that DACA was simply not going to pass constitutional muster, the ball has moved to Congress's court. And I know that this president thinks that fixing our immigration system is a priority. He ran on that, and the American people clearly support him in that mission. And so he's letting Congress know what his priorities are, and they are important ones. This is E-Verify, not letting gang members into this country, ending sanctuary city policies, just to name a few examples.
And that's what he says he is going to do in exchange for getting the 800,000 that were brought here as children without any say in the matter. And now that they're young adults in many cases, giving them a pathway to citizenship. And that's been outlined in the Senate. But what the president's talking about, which I find most interesting, Sarah, is the fact that he dealt with law enforcement to consult them first instead of dealing with legislatures to see what past bills were about. How important was it to meet with the Border Patrol, to meet with the FBI, to go down there and talk to others when it comes to getting more judges, when it comes to more Border Patrol and more lawyers for these, in some cases, unaccompanied minors?
Well, what I don't think that a lot of people recognize is that these policies, or lack thereof, of a lawful system of immigration really affect our law enforcement communities. Let's take sanctuary cities, for example. When you don't allow federal law enforcement to pick up convicted criminals from the jail, you force them into these communities, surprising people and leaving law enforcement at risk. So a lot of these policies deeply affect law enforcement. It's very important to see what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and where they need the most help creating our lawful system of immigration and then maintaining it.
So Senator Schumer on the record saying we talked to the president at that dinner about a pathway to DACA, a compromise. He said we're willing to take in reasonable border security measures and illegal immigration measures. He says this is not reasonable. What do you say?
They're unable to point to what is actually unreasonable about this. What is unreasonable about having a lawful system of immigration? What is unreasonable about the 77% of Americans who think that we should end sanctuary city policies where a convicted criminal is left in your community after they've served their time when they should be deported? Look at the poor woman in Portland. That city harbored sanctuary policies, illegal aliens. The person who attacked her had been deported 20 times, arrested 10 times just this year before he attacked and raped a 65-year-old woman. Those are not policies that the American people support, and yet I have yet to hear opponents to these legislative priorities actually say why they're against them.
Sarah, I think it's also important to point out there's 70 points here. And in order to pass comprehensive immigration, which President Bush couldn't do, President Obama obviously couldn't do, President Reagan did, but he was let down because there was no border enforcement to go along with the amnesty. However, you need 60 votes. And as certain as you are that you're right and the president feels he's right, there's going to be some give and some compromise. Do you think that there's a sense on both sides that needs to be some compromise?
Absolutely. I think that these are the president's legislative priorities. They shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. This is what he ran on for president. It's what the American people elected him to do. This is about border security, yes, but it's also about interior enforcement, and it's about reforming our lawful system of immigration for legal immigration so that we're bringing the right people in. So I think that this is what he's coming to the table with. This is what he's saying. I represent the American people, and this is what they want. But ultimately, this is Congress's decision. This is their responsibility. And that's what we saw saw with DACA, where the last administration just declared themselves the legislative branch, and we can't have that anymore. So I think the president's well aware of the responsibility and duty that Congress has to act in this arena.
And I think it's important for people listening to us right now to understand that there was talk of there'll be border enforcement in the 80s with Reagan, and it didn't happen. In 2006, both sides said we wrote a check to build a fence, some type of barrier when necessary, and a wall when it works, and they never built it. So what language is in this to make sure people have to fulfill what they promised?
Right, and that's why I think the president thinks it's so important that these go hand in hand. You've got to have a secure border. You've got to have interior enforcement. You've got to fix the asylum system as it is, end sanctuary policies that create these perverse incentives. And then you can talk about these other fixes that that Congress wants. But it has to come together. You're right. The American people have been fooled in this before, and they simply won't accept it any longer.
Some numbers are staggering. I should inform you, and I'm sure you know this already, at least the audience maybe doesn't. This year alone, there have been 34,000 plus unaccompanied minors coming across our border. And this is a time in which the border crossings have been decreased. And there's a provision passed in 2008, I think in the last year of the Bush administration, correct me if I'm wrong, that allows anyone from Central America to stay here and get a ticket to come back for their hearing. But once they're crossed, they really can't be sent back. No one really knew what this was about. But man, did we get to know this when we saw all these people surge across the border for seemingly no apparent reason.
And when the last administration highlighted that that would be their policy, particularly if you claimed any asylum or reasonable fear of return, what we saw was from 2009 to 2016, a over 1,000-point increase in the number of asylum seekers. So incentives matter. And when the last administration broadcast that we were going to essentially have an open borders policy, that is in fact what largely happened. And that's what this president has said he will not allow, that we will have rule of law and that we will have a lawful system of immigration that serves the national interest.
And when it comes to the DACA situation, will the president get Nancy Pelosi and Chuck back in to discuss this, or is it just go through the legislative process?
Well, I would never get ahead of the president when it comes to his negotiations, but I think that it's pretty clear from his legislative priorities that he laid out last night that he is serious about border security and interior enforcement and having a lawful system of immigration, which is why the American people overwhelmingly support those measures as well.
And we'll see what happens. And in some cases, there'll be a wall. In some places, there'll be a fence. And in other places, the topography doesn't allow for anything. So we'll see what happens. Sarah Flores, thanks so much. Appreciate it. It's going to be exciting to see if anything gets passed before the year's end. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, 7 minutes after the top of the hour, it's my privilege to bring in the former governor of Arkansas, who sat down with the president of the United States in an exclusive interview, not only to discuss his brand new show, but to discuss that interview that is going to be airing shortly. Governor, welcome back. It's great to see you here at this hour.
Great to be here, Brian.
All right. So, Governor,
well, it's a delight to be with you.
Governor, I guess it's an odd situation. Now, people think if you know someone in power, it's great to be able to access to that power to sit down with an interview. But how did you go about the challenge knowing your daughter worked for him, you ran against him, but in a friendly way, and you pretty much want to make sure he does well? How do you approach an interview that way?
Well, Brian, I don't pretend to be a journalist, and I don't even play one on television, and I make that very clear. I'm interviewing him more from the perspective of a commentator, not a journalist. Now, what I'm going to tell you is I'm being honest about it. A lot of the people who pretend to be journalists, they aren't either. They have strong point of view. Many of them used to work for political campaigns. They worked for politicians. They worked in Congress, and now they pretend that they're objective journalists. They clearly are not. So there was no pretense on my part. I thought that there were some great questions that I was able to pose to him, everything from the embassy in Jerusalem. When will that happen? He said it may not anytime soon. We talked about the tax bill, whether they're separated into various pieces, host of things. But, you know, there's going to be those who say, well, you just got the interview because your daughter's the press secretary. And my response to that is probably so.
Right. Absolutely. Let's use our access and connections. Welcome to America. Governor, I have to ask you, too, about what I was just talking with Sarah Flores about, and that's this immigration plan the president released. I've heard you speak before. It's very similar to what you believe in. Now bring me into the practical nature of Washington when some really good people have different objectives. How does something get passed right now?
Well, first, let me say Sarah Flores was excellent in presenting the Justice Department's view on this. But here's the reality of politics. Right now, the Republicans have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the White House. If the Democrats are serious about DACA, which they say is very important to them, then they've got to understand that if all you have is a stale biscuit to bring to the potluck, you don't get to decide that you're going to eat the entire meatloaf, because you're going to have to give up something. And if DACA is important, and by the way, Brian, I support the passage of DACA, but do it legislatively. But here's the wake-up call for the Democrats. The Republicans can ultimately do this without you, especially if they decide to upend the filibuster rule, which I think they should. But the fact is, if you don't get it done by compromising on things like border security, and the Republicans end up passing DACA, the Democrats are going to have to answer to their voters why for all the years when they had all the pieces, they didn't get it done, and when the Republicans had all the pieces, they did get it done. That is a winning issue for the Republicans. It is a huge loser for the Democrats. They need to wake up and, I would say, smell the meatloaf.
Smell the meatloaf. Very interesting. I actually think it would be a huge mistake to do the simple 50, go 51 votes, because in 4 years, the way this goes, you could have a situation where the country dramatically changes. I actually think this, as frustrating as it is, if you had a President Hillary Clinton, you might not even recognize the country. Those on the right might not recognize the country in 4 or 8 years.
Well, that's very likely, but I just believe that the American people are going to support the border wall, but they're also going to generally support DACA. Even Republicans who don't like it will go along with it to get some things that they want. And it's going to be very hard for the Democrats to justify. Now, let's try to get Democrats on board. And maybe there's at least 7 or 8 Democrats in tough districts, or maybe they just have some common sense and they realize their party's about to drive them over the cliff, like Thelma and Louise. Maybe they'll decide to vote for a comprehensive package that includes border security, and they get what they say they want, which is DACA.
I'm going to be talking more about this in the next block, but I just got to get your take on what's going on with Senator Corker and the president, the latest Republican in which the president is clashing with. If you're a Republican, you cannot be happy about this regardless of the side you're on, or are you?
No, I'm not happy at all. I'm glad Corker's leaving. You don't take on the president of your own party in the New York Times and try to make degrading statements. Now, if he says, well, I'm just responding to Donald Trump, everybody knows that when you attack Donald Trump, he's coming at you 10 times harder. What's the point? And I don't know what Corker thought he was going to get out of that, but I'll tell you this. There are more people who support Donald Trump in his role as president than support Bob Corker as a senator. And I'm sure he's finding that out from the reactions today. Now, I will say this one thing, Brian. Bob Corker is being celebrated by all the panels on the left-wing talk shows. So if you want to be loved by the left, then attack President Trump. But if you want to serve the American people and do what you were elected to do, right, then don't fight with this president. Help him.
All right, now I'm going to help you because I saw some of your show. It is awesome. You must be thrilled. You got music. You open up with a monologue. You got great interviews, a great variety. It's not just politics, even though you open with the president. Tell us how we see it.
Well, every Saturday, Sunday night, 8 o'clock Eastern, the show is going to come from Nashville. It's a show for the people of the Heartland, and so we put it in the Heartland. That's why it's in Nashville. And, of course, anytime you go to Nashville, you're going to have a lot of music, a lot of fun, and we have both.
And, if, Governor, if you have your way, you'll make every talk show host learn to play an instrument, and it'll force a lot of them off the air. All right? Because the governor can do it all. I appreciate it, Governor. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be with you.
All right. Meanwhile, 14 minutes after the hour. I think he might mean that. We'll find out later in a lie detector I'll give him to. All right. Serious stuff now. When we come back, law enforcement releasing new information about the Las Vegas shooter. We're going to give you the latest, and you're going to be surprised about the timeline. Changed dramatically. Plus, ESPN suspended this anchor Jemele Hill after she calls for a boycott of the Dallas Cowboys amid the national anthem. Really? You're taking on the Cowboys? Now take a seat. 18 minutes after the hour now, law enforcement officials in Las Vegas releasing new information tonight about Stephen Paddock and last week's mass shooting, which he perpetrated. For more, we go to Fox News correspondent Dan Springer in Las Vegas. Dan, a lot of developments today.
Yeah, and a couple of very interesting developments, Brian. One is that the police have changed the timeline on when that security guard at the Mandalay Bay Hotel was shot. They now say it happened before the gunman opened fire on the crowd. That is really significant because it means the very first shots in this massacre were fired in the hallway at Jesus Campo, who went to the 32nd floor to check on an open door alarm. It was not the shooter's door, but while in the hallway, Campos heard the sound of drilling, which could have been the suspect still prepping for his attack. 6 minutes after firing those 200 rounds or so into the hallway at Campos, Stephen Paddock unleashed thousands of bullets on the festival. It was almost nonstop for 11 minutes. Campos almost certainly prevented any chance for an escape and likely saved a co-worker's life.
Immediately upon being injured, notified security of his situation. In close proximity of Mr. Campos being shot, there was also a maintenance worker that presented himself on the 32nd floor, and Mr. Campos prevented him from receiving any injuries.
Now, when SWAT officers finally blew down that door and got inside, they said it looked like a gun shop with ammunition and rifles everywhere. As for the investigation into motive, the FBI interviewed Paddock's brother Eric for a second time. This one lasted 4 hours, and it was done here in Las Vegas very early Sunday morning. Neither police nor the brother revealed the line of questioning, but they're still building a profile of this mass killer. The FBI also conducted a second search of Paddock's home in Mesquite, Nevada. They got another search warrant after interviewing Paddock's live-in girlfriend. Another development today, police are desperately searching for what triggered the mass shooting plot, and now police say it was not just one thing.
In coordination with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, a comprehensive picture is being drawn as to the suspect's mental state, and currently we do not believe there is one particular event in the suspect's life for us to key on.
And Sheriff Lombardo says he is frustrated, but he will not stop until he can answer the question why this happened. Brian?
We still don't know how he killed it, how he died, and why he would kill himself at that point with no one threatening. We had a totally different vision. Is there a chance, Dan, that he killed himself by mistake?
Oh, I don't think so. I think he put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. I think that was totally by design.
All right.
I don't know if he had designs on killing himself before all this, but he knew he wasn't getting out of there after he fired those rounds at the security guard. He knew that they knew where he was.
Yeah, they say he had an escape plan. He had some protective equipment, and he was shooting at those tanks. So that theory by the local newspaper there ended up being corrected and confirmed. Dan Springer, thanks so much. I'm sure we're going to learn more tomorrow. Meanwhile, let's change gears to the other major story, probably topic of conversation at your dinner table tonight. The NFL national anthem controversy taking a dramatic turn. Listen to this. ESPN is giving a 2-week suspension to anchor and Trump critic Jemele Hill after her calls for a boycott of advertisers for the Dallas Cowboys. Hill's request followed comments from Cowboys owner Jerry Jones before the game when he told his team, "You better stand." Listen.
We cannot, in the NFL, in any way, give the implication that we tolerate disrespecting the flag. We cannot do that. And I know the vice president did leave because, in his opinion, the teams were. There is no equivocation here. We'll stand for the flag. If there's anything that is disrespectful to the flag, then we will not play.
So the vice president leaves. The Jerry Jones has been in constant contact with the president, we understand. Every Saturday, the NFL working the teams to find out what the players want to do and where the team is at. What a distraction at the very least, and what angst for the American people and the sports fan. Joining us now with his reaction and her reaction, former from Denver, is Ted Harvey, chairman of the Pro-Trump PAC Committee to Defend the President, and from Washington, Democratic strategist Robin Biro. Robin, first off, when you heard the vice president went to celebrate the retiring of Peyton Manning's number at halftime, and you went to Indianapolis, what were you thinking? Were you thinking something's going to happen?
You know, Brian, I want to also say that I'm a veteran U.S. Army Ranger that served with the 75th Ranger Regiment. So, you know, I'm deeply patriotic.
Okay.
And what I expected to happen did happen. The vice president did go there, and under Donald Trump's instruction, if one of the players took a knee, he did leave. I will assert to you, though, that is his right to exercise a peaceful protest, just like these NFL players did. He very peacefully got up and left because he was protesting how these players chose to exercise their right to peacefully protest racism in America. That fact, though, I think is getting lost on people. I think that people really do somehow conflate the idea that these players are actually protesting the flag, the anthem, the United States.
They are
racism.
They are protesting what's going on in America, and the flag represents America. Am I not right?
Brian,
Ted?
it absolutely
let Ted answer, okay? Am I right, Ted?
No. Without a doubt. You know, the American people love the NFL. I'm here in Denver. I love the Broncos. But I love my country more. And the fact that we have paid entertainers all across the country on the left, whether it's in Hollywood or whether it's in New York or whether it's in the NFL, that are continually trying to disrespect this country, disrespect our president, and disrespect our Constitution is totally inappropriate. And the American people sent a pretty strong message to the NFL. If you continue to disrespect the flag and the president, we are going to stop watching the NFL. And there's consequences for your action. You can do this. You can continue to disrespect America, but you're going to have consequences for that behavior.
And now let's switch over to what happened to ESPN. We have Jemele Hill, who's on a show that's just getting its feet underneath them. But again, she tweeted out something that she told her bosses she wouldn't do, and she apologized for a couple of weeks ago. She's essentially saying in a tweet if you are against the Dallas Cowboy owner Jerry Jones forcing his player to stand for the national anthem, you hit him where it hurts. Go after his advertisers. And in a matter of minutes, a network that spent $15 billion to air Monday Night Football, Robin, said you have a 2-week suspension. Do you agree with ESPN's decision?
She is their employee, and she actually attacked her employer. So that's a difference. I want to point out that we've gotten so far away from this discussion. This happened because Colin Kaepernick was sitting on the bench. A Special Forces veteran was offended by that. His name was Nate Boyer. He and Colin Kaepernick worked out a deal, and they said the best way to peacefully protest in a respectful manner was to take a knee, because in the military, I appreciate your service and your sincerity. You're being hurt.
But when you take a seat on the national anthem, I don't care what deal you cut with some great Special Forces operator. I can make my own decision. And Ted, that's the problem. The American people aren't looking for a pie chart. They know how they feel when someone takes a knee and disrespects the flag.
That's exactly right. That's what all this is about. And the ESPN commentator, she was far worse in what she said to the supporters of President Trump. She called all 60,000 supporters who voted for the president white supremacists, which is outrageous, and she should have been fired 2 weeks ago. The fact that she only gets a slap on the wrist because she offended the employer because she went after the Dallas Cowboys, that's ridiculous. She should have been fired a long time ago for how she's handling this whole situation.
And Robin, you talk about getting out of control and how did it get here? It's going to get worse. Al Sharpton, a real unifier, just tweeted out, he says Jemele's suspension is an outrage and should not go unanswered. So expect protest outside ESPN about Colin Kaepernick whimsically taking a knee a year and a half ago and having a reporter follow up and say, why were you sitting? Why were you kneeling? Him saying, well, I don't like the way law enforcement treats minorities in this country. And now we have this mess, hurting a multi-billion-dollar company, making the fans make a choice. And every Sunday, you don't care so much. You care as much if your team wins or loses to how many of your players sit on the side. Final thoughts, Robin?
Final thoughts, Brian. I took an oath to defend this flag. This flag stands for freedom. You have the freedom to choose how you exercise your First Amendment rights. I think I absolutely decry forced nationalism. I think that's a very slippery slope that we're headed to.
I don't agree with that.
This is forced nationalism.
No, it isn't. These people, we're making a decision. I'm not telling Ted what to think. You're not telling Ted what to think. Ted, final thought?
Well, he's exactly right. The Constitution gives you the freedom to do that, and there's consequences for doing that. And one of the consequences are you could be put on the bench, just like Jerry Jones told his players today, or you could be fired because you don't have enough revenue coming into to the industry. That's what this is all about. The American people are patriotic Americans who love their country more than they love the NFL, and they better get on their feet and they better start playing ball and entertaining the public rather than trying to make political statements.
And if Dak Prescott decides he's going to take a knee or sit down, does Jerry Jones say go to the locker room? That's his starting quarterback?
He better.
Man, ESPN, the NFL, everybody's on the clock. Thanks, guys. Great debate. Thanks for your service. Appreciate it, Robin. Up next, President Trump intensifying his war of words with Senator Bob Corker. But will there be fallout for his agenda in Congress? We're going to talk to Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn, who's running for Senator Corker's seat. She will join us live with her reaction and a Twitter controversy you're not going to believe. Well, get this. There's a nasty feud between the president and Senator Bob Corker. They were once really good friends, and it's triggering fresh tensions between the White House and the Republican leaders in Congress. They're being forced in many cases to take sides. Take a listen now to what Senator Corker told the New York Times on Sunday about the international ramifications of President Trump's tweets to the New York Times.
He doesn't realize that, that we could be heading towards World War III with the kind of comments that he's making.
Really? So take a listen to the strong message former presidential advisor Steve Bannon has for Senator Corker.
If Bob Corker has any honor, any decency, he should resign immediately. He should not let those words stand what he said about the president of the United States.
Win. Wow, it's getting ugly. But what kind of impact will this fight have in the critical months ahead for the president's agenda? He needs Senator Corker's votes, whether you like it or not. Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee is running for Senator Corker's seat in 2018 because he's quitting. And she joins us right now with reaction from Nashville. Congresswoman, I know you're not in a great spot because you're friends with Senator Corker and you're a big supporter of President Trump's. But in this case, can you really support Senator Corker going to the New York Times, ripping the president?
Brian, I think that when we hear things like this, my first reaction is I'm not going to get in the middle of anybody else's argument. And I will tell you, I think most of my colleagues in the House and I are working diligently and want to work with our colleagues in the Senate and stand with President Trump to get this agenda across the finish line. He ran on it. He promised action, and it is up to us to deliver. And the main thing the American people ask us is, when are you going to get Obamacare repealed, taxes reformed, build a wall, and when are you going to start on infrastructure?
Well, do you think Senator Corker, who's chairman of Foreign Relations, knows that the problem the president's played is a North Korea crisis like we have not seen before, and the recertification of the worst Iranian deal you can imagine, which, according to some of Senator Corker's maneuvers, allowed it to go forward? Yesterday, he told the New York Times the president acts like he's doing the Apprentice or something as a president. I wouldn't expect Senator Schumer to say that.
Comments like that are not going to be helpful when they come from anyone. But there again, I'm not going to get in the middle of a fight. We have a lot of things that we have to get done by the end of the year. And it is important that we in Congress focus on the issues that the American people want us to focus on and nothing else.
Congresswoman, as a lawmaker, very few people outwork you. Whether it's the convention you're putting together or agenda you're looking to push forward, whether you're in the minority or majority. I've seen it up close. Now you're making the decision to jump in and become the next senator from Tennessee and replace Senator Corker. And to do that, you got to run ads. And you chose to run this ad on Twitter. Let's watch.
I'm Marsha Blackburn. I'm a hardcore, card-carrying Tennessee conservative. I'm politically incorrect and proud of it. I'm 100% pro-life. I fought Planned Parenthood, and we stopped the sale of baby body parts. Thank God.
Well, Twitter said that is too inflammatory. We will not run that ad. What's your reaction?
It is astounding to me that Twitter, which is an important outlet, would choose not only to censor a political ad, but that they would censor a pro-life message. This is a pro-women, pro-baby, pro-life message. And yes, indeed, as chairman of the Select Investigative Panel, the work that our committee delivered, stop this practice of selling baby body parts. It's something that people wanted to see shut down. And you know what is so amazing? Twitter can go out there and allow all of this showing take a knee during the national anthem, but they will not allow a pro-life, pro-woman, pro-baby message.
And what was their explanation?
Their explanation was it was too inflammatory and that it would evoke a negative response. But if I were to take that out, then omit the pro-life part, then they would allow us to push forward that video.
So we just found this. This is advertised. Twitter accepted this from Naral. The GOP's 20-week abortion ban will harm women and families and criminalize doctors for providing routine care. That seems like it might be a sensitive topic that some people might deem as hate content, maybe you, but they took that money. Double standard.
Yes, it is a double standard. And while they doubled down and issued a second statement today, they disallowed my video, I said, look, I'm just doubling down on the fact that, yes, I am pro-life and I stand by my message.
Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Right. And now Twitter rejected you, but we said yes. So at least you end on a happy note. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead, one of the issues that would be facing the Congresswoman if she's a senator, as well as when she's in Congress, Defense Secretary James Mattis delivering a new ominous warning to our Army over the North Korea crisis. Don't go away. Wow, this is disturbing. You got a series of out-of-control wildfires I'm splitting the screen with right now. They are wreaking havoc across California. At least 17 fires are currently burning, which have taken the lives of 10 people, with more casualties expected. Now, in Northern California's famed wine country, at least 1,500 structures destroyed, 20,000 residents evacuated. Governor Jerry Brown, obviously, a state of emergency declared. And around Anaheim in Southern California, you got a brush fire destroying 6 homes with thousands of structures in jeopardy. 4,500 acres have been burned so far, driven by strong winds, with only 5% of the fire contained. And that's with drought virtually subsided after last year's rain. Meanwhile, the Trump administration ratcheting up thinly veiled threats of war against North Korea, with Secretary of Defense James Mattis delivering a new warning today.
It is right now a diplomatically led, economic sanction buttressed effort to try to turn North Korea off this path. Now, what does the future hold? Neither you nor I can say. So there's one thing the U.S. Army can do, and that is you have got to be ready to ensure that we have military options that our president can employ if needed.
Wow. In addition to Mattis's very direct comments, President Trump took to Twitter and said this: our country has been unsuccessfully dealing with North Korea for 25 years, billions of dollars, getting nothing. Policy didn't work. They're on the same page, Dan Henniger. You are the deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. And the reason why you're in here, you know there's something big going on right now.
Yeah, something big is going on, Brian. And what it is that the United States finally has a military component to its diplomacy or negotiations, let's say, with North Korea. Now, President Trump has been criticized for threatening North Korea publicly. But I think in this case, it took something like that to get the world's attention, to get the attention of, say, China, the United Nations, to change the status quo, which was to only deal with North Korea diplomatically. And I might add, the person who was famous for saying that diplomacy counted for nothing unless you had the threat of military action behind it was former Secretary of State George Shultz. And no one ever accused Secretary Shultz of being a cowboy. But he was right. You had to have the military possibility standing behind stern diplomacy.
And you have General Mattis. I know he wants to be Defense Secretary Mattis, but he's still General Mattis, making those statements, knowing the world's carrying them. On the other side, we're not just waiting for war. 20 nations have curbed diplomatic or business operations with North Korea. You're talking about Mexico, Peru, Spain, Kuwait. All across the globe, the president, with his evidently bad relations with the rest of the world, seem to be responding to him.
Well, they are indeed. And, you know, the State Department put that policy in as far back in February. We talked to them then, and they said it was their intention to go around the world trying to get the rest of the countries you mentioned to squeeze North Korea financially, economically, and diplomatically, not letting their ships come into port anymore, not allowing them to transfer money through their countries, through their banking systems. And that is beginning to work. That's not the solution, but it's part of the plan to try to isolate North Korea more than it has been in the past.
And I hope we're on hyperspeed when it comes to missile defense, because that's going to get their attention. Also, Japan fully backs President Trump's hardline stance on North Korea. That's coming from the Japanese newspapers. The American media is not taking the president as serious as the rest of the world.
Well, God knows the Japanese are the country that has these missiles flying over them constantly. But, you know, everyone is accusing President Trump of talking about nuking North Korea and doing the unthinkable. You know what the unthinkable is, Brian? It's the Japanese giving up on the United States and getting nuclear capability on their own. And nobody doubts that they could do it. Or South Korea going to nuclear capability, other nations in Asia or the Middle East. Then you really are in a situation where you've got the unthinkable. The unthinkable would become routine at that point.
And we're getting closer and closer to the president going to China in November, at which time they don't want to only talk about North Korea. To do that, they got to show some real progress if they don't want the president just to sit there and dwell on it like Rain Man, because that's going to be the number one topic. They want to talk about trade in the South China Sea, and Taiwan. Dan, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Brian.
All right, Dan Henniger, staying up late. Meanwhile, up next on this show, will the left sink Columbus Day for good? I'm not kidding. The onslaught against the holiday and the statues representing the explorer. Well, this is a white-hot topic. We'll discuss it next. You have the day off today? You have the day off from school today? Congratulations. You got to celebrate Columbus Day, but will it soon be named Indigenous People Day? Everybody wants to take down Christopher Columbus and go after his statues, but instead, he's becoming now a favorite target. Indigenous People Day might actually be the new Columbus Day. Not if many Italians had anything to say about it. Listen to some of the angst across the country.
The truth needs to come out. By his own admission, Columbus had committed many atrocities and was really the author of the transatlantic slave trade. He led and participated in the annihilation of over 3 million indigenous people.
How did she fit all that on the card? I'm not sure. He also discovered a brand new world and did something nobody else did and changed the world forever. Brad Meltzer is a historian and author of the brand new books. This is a great series. You got to pick them all up. These new ones are called I Am Sacagawea and I Am Gandhi. And if you want your kids to know about history, which you do, this is the quickest, best way to do it, because Brad tells a story like nobody else. Brad, sadly, I got to open up with a bad story. Columbus, not credible for a holiday? What did he do?
Listen, it's amazing we're talking about this today. And you know that I wrote these books because I wanted to give my kids real heroes. I was tired of my kids looking at reality TV show stars and people who are famous for being famous. And one of the things we realize right now is, as this Columbus Day is closing, I've never seen, Brian, so much venom spewed back and forth by both sides of each other. And we fight as Americans all the time, but not like this. And what I'm seeing historically is we're playing this game over and over again. It's called us versus them. You know, they're wrong, we're right, us versus them. We hone our skills on social media and, let's be honest, on cable television. But I'm tired of playing us versus them. It's time to get back to we. And the only way to do it is we've got to listen to each other. This issue about Columbus is a pretty amazing story, right? Is it great to celebrate Christopher Columbus and the idea of exploration? Absolutely. Is it also true that because of him when he came here, that it led to the genocide of an entire people? Yes, those two things can be true at the exact same time, but this is a nuanced argument. And the world doesn't want nuance. We got to listen to each other, and that's how we're going to figure it out. Because when my daughter today, and listen to this, Brian, when my daughter today was dealing with this issue in her class, I said to her, what'd they say? And she said, well, one side wants Indigenous People Day, one side wants Columbus Day. And I said, what'd you think? She said, it's hard, Dad. It's really a complex argument. And my 12-year-old can figure out it's complex, but America doesn't want to say. We just want to say he's good or he's bad, and it can't just be that.
Brad, nobody's perfect. We're going to have a lot of empty pedestals. These are people that broke through a time, and they last forever for a reason. Not because they're perfect, but because they did things in many ways nobody else did. That's why they stood out. Columbus did something nobody else did, but he's not perfect.
That's right. I always say in the books, you know, someone said to me, why'd you do I Am George Washington? He was a slave owner. And I said, if you want perfection, only God's perfect, right? That's it. What I want is I want to show my kids amazing things that they're capable of. And obviously, that's what we have to look at here. We have to find, you can pull the best of them, but you got to tell the full story. And that's what people are trying to do. The thing is, I'm so convinced that if we listen to each other, we're better off. I issued yesterday on my Facebook page an ice cream challenge. I said, if you go out and ask someone from the opposite side of your political views, ask them out for ice cream, and the first 100 people who do so, and I'm not talking about going like with someone violent or a Nazi or putting yourself in danger, but the first 100 people who take a picture and send it, I'll send you a gift card for $10 paying for your ice cream for the first 100 people. I'm so convinced that if we actually talk to each other, we'll realize we all want the same thing. We want a better America. We want to celebrate decency, generosity, and the amazing exploration that we know is so vital to this country.
Wait
we
a second.
all want that.
Brad, I'm just getting word now that Juan Williams and Sean Hannity want to take you up on that challenge, and you better have the cash, okay? So they're 1 and 2.
I know Juan really well.
98 more, and then you're off the hook. Congratulations on these 2 books. And by the way, it's so much harder to take a great man like Gandhi and a great woman like Sacagawea and knock it down to a children's book than it is even to write their comprehensive biographies. You do it regularly. Good job, Brad. Thanks so much.
Thanks, brother. We got to be better than what angers us. That Gandhi said.
Well, I wish I came up with something like that. You always have to get the last word. Why is that? Back in a moment. Ha, I got it. Before we go, a quick programming note. The Fox updates will be going on all night because of the deadly wildfires sweeping California, which have now killed, sadly, 10 people, ravaged tens of thousands of acres of land and thousands of structures. And tomorrow morning, be sure to get the latest developments with Fox and Friends First, beginning at 4 a.m. with Hella Childress. And, of course, Fox and Friends from 6 to 9. That is Ivana Trump. She sits down with her own Ainsley Earhardt. Don't miss a minute of it. And also, before we go, don't forget to listen to the Brian Kilmeade Show on radio. Amongst our guests, the great Ron Chernow, Ron DeSantis, and Alan West. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Now let's take a wide shot and focus on something else.